I'm Leigh Brown. This is Crazy Shit in Real Estate. And this is part two with Rashmi Airan. Now, if you did not see part one, you need to pause or stop this episode and go back an episode to make sure you get the full backstory because you're going to enjoy this very long and intense conversation. And I cannot wait to hear what you think on the other side.
Look, we're both wearing white. How is that?
Pretty magical. Thank you so much for doing this. I was talking to my podcast team yesterday, and they said actually a two-parter is one of the things that would help with views and listens. And so who better to showcase?
Well, there you go. Who knew? I'm sure you did your 6-mile run this morning.
I did 10 today because
wow, good for you.
What we call the Church of Saturday Long Run.
Uh-huh. I hear you. Like, when I ran marathons. Have you you're running marathons, I guess?
I've done 7 of them and I didn't want to do any more, but 2 of my girlfriends are turning 50 this year and they said, we wanted Chicago, so enter with us. And I said, I've done Chicago twice. I don't want to. And they said, but we've been friends since kindergarten. So I got guilted into signing up.
It's a great marathon, though. I love the Chicago Marathon. To me, it's one of my
favorites. People are delightful. I think it's a fun race. And so all 3 of us signed up. And guess who got in and who didn't?
Shut up. You got in and they didn't.
And those 2 didn't. I said, you MFers are going to have to fundraise because you made me sign up for this race. And I
mean, you could. Okay, Leigh, you could just not do it, No,
I got in. I'm in the lottery. Why would you not go?
I know. So I've run 6 marathons and then I don't even know how many.
Why don't you fundraise for Chicago and you can join us in October? My friends can be your friends.
Yeah, well, I'm sure they would be, but I can't run anymore. I actually, sadly, you saw me in the gym. I can't. So I have really bad scoliosis and, it's been there since childhood. It never got corrected for whatever reason. And it's always been a problem, but all the years of running that I did, which I ran for 20 years, I think it just pounded it and pounded it. And now I'm disc on disc. I'm on vertebra, but I have no disc. I have arthritis. I have bone spurs. It's so bad. Last year I got 2 cortisone shots. I'm actually having an appointment next week to see the doctor again because I'll probably need another one. And, he basically said, well, you could run, but you need to change how you run, completely change your running gait. And I'm 53. What am I going to do? Change how I run now? If I really wanted to, I could. So I miss the runner's high. I do. But this morning I did 4.5 miles walking uphill. And then I did a 60-minute spinning class. So kind of.
I would so much rather run than do that. So
I know. I think I told you, I used to have to run at least 6 miles to even feel like I got to work out. That was just, like you said, it was my church.
It's here though. It's not here.
It's totally your mental clarity. I needed, the kids when they were little, they would be like, Mom, you need to go for a run. You're not being very nice, right?
Husband, if I don't run in the morning, he's like, don't you need to? But they say swimming for women of our medium age, swimming is supposed to be the good thing.
And I know, but you know what?
It's different on your oxygen.
Right. So when you're a runner trying to swim, which is breathing in through your nose, out through your mouth, which is what we do when we run. This is breathing in through your mouth, out through your nose, which is completely opposite. And I have friends that are they're incredible swimmers, used to be also runners. They do Ironman and all that stuff. I'm like, okay, I feel like I'm going to hyperventilate and die in this pool. I can't swim. But I need.
She took adult lessons and she recommends that all people of a certain age take adult swim lessons because she was doing her kid version of running and then she started doing adult swim to balance herself out and she loves it. So she's a big fan.
Yeah, I need to find. I know good coaches here. You know what it is? It's you got to find the time to invest in that. Yeah. And it's got to be separate from my workout time because at the beginning you won't feel like you got to work out. I don't know. It's all mental.
Yeah. Where does it rank in life?
My priority right now, grow my business.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And to obviously change the world by growing your business. How cool is that?
Yeah, totally.
And how lucky are we to record this during the Duke game so that after we're done, I can go see if they've lost because that would make my heart so happy to see.
Who are they playing?
I don't even remember because I don't care about Duke, but I saw they were on my TV. Because Jay Billis was on TV. And I will tell you my personal experience with Jay, I was when I was in college, I did a summer internship with the district attorney's office in Charlotte.
Okay.
And my assistant district attorney for whom I was interning, we were doing traffic court. And Jay Billis had to come in there with his ticket. And so he had to, the intern, he had to show me his little ticket. And then I got to decide if we would write it off immediately. I carried it over to Tony and I said,
A little power trip.
but he's got a ticket. I guess we're going to have to let him off because he had his proof of, I can't remember if it was an expired inspection or something in the court. If you bring in your proof, they generally let you off.
Yeah.
But I remember I was in charge and he was the penitent in traffic court. I might avoid that way too much. And I know that's ugly and rude, but oh well.
Nah. So wait, how did your meeting go? Didn't you say you had a meeting with FEMA yesterday?
Yes, we have a new interim director and he's
But
working
I thought that like I just read that like Trump was trying to get rid of FEMA, so I'm confused.
Well, in the meantime, you have this agency with 20,000 people and policy manual that is wildly broken. And he was trying to get information from those of us on the ground in Western North Carolina. And what have we been dealing with? What's the good? What's the bad? Where has it worked? Where has it not worked? He's really, I was very impressed by the way he's being very surgical and trying to figure out exactly what are the actionable impacts and what can be changed.
Mm-hmm.
I really don't think the agency is going to go away because throwing it back to the states doesn't solve the fact that the states may have emergency response problems because North Carolina does. Our governor did not activate, but other states did. And so that's not a perfect solution, but 20,000 employees while people are starving and out in the cold also is not a solution. So I loved that what we're putting together is a town hall of people in Western North Carolina and their experiences with FEMA. And he's not just looking for people with horror stories. He's like, I want to hear from people for whom it went well too, because I want to know what did work. Because there's obviously a mixed spectrum of experiences. And as somebody who is pretty organically curious, I like asking questions before I jump to conclusions, which I know is pretty opposite most of the world these days. I love his approach, that methodical, let me ask, let me listen. And he said what he wants to find in the Zoom call with these people is a through line. What's the through line? What's the big thing that we can address or the small thing that we can address now to make people's experiences different? Because he's also trying to figure out what the impacts are going to be on California of what's happened in North Carolina. And we also know another disaster can crop up in any state at any time. So how quickly can we make improvements? And I love that mindset. So I'm very, very optimistic about how he's going to approach that agency. And I kind of hope they make him the permanent director and not just the interim, but who knows how the system's going to play.
What's his name?
Cameron Hamilton. He's former SEAL and he's from Virginia.
And how did he get in touch with you? Just because you're super involved in your efforts there?
Well, I have a nonprofit now and we've been serving in Western North Carolina since day one. And I'm visible in some spheres, not in others. Of course, I'm not the one with the most clicks and taps on TikTok and X because I'm way too much of a policy nerd. But we have two friends of friends that have connected me because they know I've got the political acumen and I've got the boots on the ground. And they also know I'm not the person who just throws bombs. I have ideas. And so the main reason he wanted to hear was A, I have survivors I can connect him with, and B, I have ideas that he could take into consideration. So I'm grateful for that.
Yeah. No, I think that's great. Good for you. Exciting.
Very exciting stuff. I love somebody who can make decisions, listens to my ideas, and I can just sit back and say, all right, next project.
Execute. Yeah. Execute. Let me see it come to fruition. Well, good. I mean, I hope that, I was honestly really disturbed when I heard that there's even a notion of getting rid of FEMA, just because I do think the states can't handle it at all. There's times when they need national support. So that's good to hear that.
I mean, we should get rid of the current iteration, but it doesn't mean you don't need a different iteration. I think you need 2.0. And so what I had shared with them last night is you have 20,000 employees in the agency. They're not all effective and they wouldn't be in any company. So you got to start sifting out who's got the presence of mind and the mindset to work in this agency because it's a different kind of agency than, say, the IRS. You need people who have that humanitarian undercurrent to what they're doing because you're serving humans. And I think that's where the disconnect happened in Western North Carolina. You had cubicle workers in the mountains talking to people of a different geography, a different level of trust with the government, and they didn't know how to connect the dots. And I think that comes from not having a curiosity about the other person's experiences and their life and just asking more questions. Everything should be asking more questions. And so one thing I told him last night is that when you have an area like Western North Carolina and the geography, I said the grace we have to give FEMA in this scenario is that they've never experienced a geography like this where people are up a mountainside and you can only get to them on a 4x4 and you can only get to rescue them by helicopter. I mean, it was so wildly different than what happens in Florida, for example, where you're zero elevation, you can get to people. It was different. I said, but the people who serve are the volunteer fire departments and the churches and the small nonprofits. I said, it'd be nice if FEMA had a way to deputize all of those local groups and say, hey, you guys go canvass house by house, tell us what's going on, instead of what happened, which was the heavy hand of the bureaucracy that said, we have to do it, not you people. And because they were trying to be heavy handed, we're over here doing the work and they're not talking to each other. I said, you could so easily create a system by which these organizations like mine are vetted by somebody in some agency somewhere, check my 501c3, make sure I'm not a background check problem, and then send us out and then gather that information so that you can provide the resources. I said, there's a way to structure it that would be very efficient and wouldn't waste any dollars and could get to people faster. So that's my big idea, and I hope that it finds purchase and we'll find out.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because it's kind of like using your real estate knowledge and wisdom in a completely different way to help your community. Right? Because it is really from your knowledge of all the decades that you've been doing real estate that you've been able to call what's needed in your community. It's really cool.
Which is why I'm not the one to talk about search and rescue. I've supported search and rescue, but I'm not that person. I'm not special forces. I don't have that whole mentality. But housing, I got you. Permits, zoning regulations, I'm on it. And I think that's too what he's interested in. And I love this mindset. I need to talk to people with different experiential backgrounds so that I can put together a bigger picture of how could we be more efficient by understanding the different areas. And I think frankly, his response could be something we all apply to our professional and our personal lives. Ask a lot of questions, reach out for some different backgrounds and experiences, and then start adding it all together without coming in with your preset notions of there's only one way forward.
Yeah.
Because, there's not just one way forward in anything. As you've learned, as we come back to part 2, where we get to unpack everything that occurred when you got to come home early after being a witness for the things that had gone on in and around and through what happened with that mortgage situation in your life. So let's pick up part 2.
Okay. So I'm gonna backtrack a little bit and tell your audience that when I was asked to go to county jail and testify in this other case, the reason why they asked me was, which I think is really interesting since this is a real estate podcast. So this case in Tampa involved the same developer, different set of facts, different set of players. Just so your audience knows, the developer in my case was not indicted.
Ever to this day?
Ever. His operations guy was indicted, but the actual principal developer who made all the money, the main guy who was making the decisions, because, and this is important to know, he was wisely advised, don't sign anything. Don't put your name on anything. So his operations guy was on everything. He was the one that was emailing back and forth to all the buyers and the, mortgage brokers and the realtors and me. And he was the one that was signing as POA, power of attorney for the developer. So everything was done by this operations guy, his right hand, and the developer was never indicted. So, but anyway.
So wait a minute. So the operations guy was the power of attorney for the developer, and that got the developer off the hook that he had a limited POA to sign for him?
Uh-huh.
That's not.
Well, remember, in a white collar case, The grand jury receives evidence from the FBI, from the U.S. attorney, that they have, spent years. In my case, they spent however many years, 6 years investigating. So the actual documentary evidence is basically what decides whether the grand jury is going to indict. Okay. If the U.S. Attorney's Office doesn't have evidence to present to the grand jury, they know, like, they actually, you know, logically understand and know that the developer is involved. But if they don't have evidence that they can provide to the grand jury to back it up, it doesn't elevate to the level of an indictment.
Okay, so this developer, two different marketplaces.
Mhm.
He's not even operating under different company names. Did he have shell companies, or just the dude knew how to play the system so he didn't have to create shell companies? Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
I, I'm I'm floored by this.
Yeah. I was so angry for so long about this, right? Like, as I was going through the process, I was like, but I don't understand. Why isn't he indicted? And actually, I'll give you a little caveat. The woman who introduced me to the developer was a woman I had worked with in like a previous job position. I used to be the county attorney for Miami-Dade County, and she represented bail bondsmen. And one of my assignments was working with bail bond escheatures. So there's a statute in Florida that provides for, I don't want to go into like lots of detail, but basically provided for monies that were left in the court to be taken out by bail bondsmen if they were still there. So it's a long and convoluted story.
So there's an cheap process for bail bondsmen, is what you're saying.
Correct.
So when I watched Jackie Brown, which I think is one of Quentin Tarantino's least appreciated movies,
Mhm.
and I'm watching that bail bondsman, he was protected because he can escheat some funds from the court.
Correct.
Okay.
Well, in Florida.
I
I
got
don't
to
know
go
if
watch
other
that movie
states
again
have.
now that we're talking bail bondsman and cheating, and I love that movie. So anyway, I totally distracted myself. Carry
It's
on.
okay. So there was a woman that this attorney, but she also did a little criminal defense and stuff like that, Anyway, I end up leaving that county attorney's office. I start my real estate practice. 2 years in or something, I run into her at a restaurant. And she says to me, "Oh my gosh, I didn't realize you're doing real estate. Oh, I just met this real estate developer. I know he's looking for a new attorney. Would you like to meet him?" No, no. Well, actually, what happened was she took my card, and then 2 days later called me and said this to me. And you got to remember, like, I'm a solopreneur. My kids are 2 and 3. My husband's a firefighter, so I'm the major breadwinner. And I think to myself, I need this client. Remember, like, this is what I shared in part one. Anyway, so fast forward, I get indicted, and I'm thinking, I ask my attorney, why isn't so and so, this woman, why wasn't she indicted? Well, as it turns out, um, there's this idea, there's this notion that if the FBI comes to you, right, there's this notion of first in, most protected. So what happened was when the FBI came, remember, I let them into my office. I talked to them for 4 hours without an attorney, right? She knew better because she does criminal work. I didn't know any better. So when the FBI went to her, she said, "Can I call you back? I'll come back in 3 weeks with my attorney." So she goes in, and when she went in, she gave her version of the facts, which ended up being the factual scenario that I had to plead to. And she said, "I will give you all of my documents. I will give you everything I know, but I want privileged and qualified immunity."
So are
So,
you saying that her version was treated as
fact,
the gospel, and
yes.
so
And
you're working off
it's
of?
like 70% true. There's definitely parts where she like mitigated herself. But whatever, I have owned up to whatever the factual scenario is. I have pled to that. The reason why this is important is she, um, basically on every file was making money not only from me as a referral fee, which is legal, like lawyers can give referral fees to lawyers. So she was getting a referral fee from me, from lawyers, but a developer was giving her money to like manage every one of these just beneficial interest disbursements, these buyers incentives. So let's just say she made more than 10 times what I made. Okay. And now I realize that she kind of masterminded the whole thing and realized that I was like this young, vulnerable attorney, alone, solopreneur. I was hungry. So she had met with this developer like before I had seen her at this restaurant. And then she went to the developer and said, "Hey, I have an idea. Let's get this woman to do it for us. I bet she'll do it and not ask questions." And that's what happened. So I was so mad. Like when I tell you, getting an ulcer type of mad.
Right.
that the developer and this woman didn't get indicted, right? Eventually, when I pled, one of the things I decided was I have to forgive both of them because holding on to the anger was only hurting me. And once I got indicted, it was like, whether they get indicted or not, I've already been indicted. It doesn't change my lot in life. So I forgave them spiritually. Whatever happens in their lives, whatever lessons they're supposed to learn are not my lessons. And I let it go. And it was very hard, but it was actually very freeing. And people will say all the like people ask me, like, what is he doing? What is your developer doing now? What is happening to that woman? I'm like, I don't know. I
No,
don't,
no. Yeah.
I've never looked him up. No. I actually somebody did just tell me that I think the developer just passed away. I haven't even looked that up because it just doesn't even affect my brain. I just don't want to spend energy on it. Anyway, so when I came home, I had to deconstruct just for me personally, how did I go so off path? Like how did the little Indian girl in pigtails that was always trying to be the perfect kid, how did I end up in federal prison? What was wrong with the decisions I made or what was going on in my brain that allowed myself to make these bad decisions or not ask for help? So I began to do a lot of research in behavioral ethics and behavioral psychology. And I'll just share with your audience a couple of the main things that I learned that I was experiencing at the time that I was working with this client. So the first is I'll say is it's called overconfidence bias. So Leigh, you and I are strong, independent, professional women, and we are confident in ourselves, right? Doesn't mean that we're not insecure in other ways. And when we were little girls, we didn't have it, right? But I grew up the oldest of three daughters. And my dad always raised us. And in the Indian community, sort of traditionally, there's a notion that boys are better than girls, right? So my dad and mom, thank goodness, always raised all three of us to believe that we are just as smart as, strong as, good as a boy. And when my mom, many, many years ago, her family tried to convince her to keep trying for a boy because there are three girls. And my dad is the one that said, no, my
Good.
three girls are as good as boys, and there's no difference. So I was raised with this mentality, right? Like I'm strong, which also meant as the oldest, I had to be confident. It's part of the reason why I never wanted to ask for help because I thought I had to know it all. And for some reason, people think attorneys are supposed to know it all, anyways, And so I always thought that being confident is a strength, which is obviously, right? We want to be confident in who we are. We want to own up to whatever our insecurities are and then deal with it, but be confident when we enter the world or when we're talking to a potential client or whatever. But the notion of overconfidence bias, basically it means that when you're too much confidence, it's a trap. And this is how it goes. Overconfidence bias is the idea that Rashmi, I am a good person. Why? I'm a great mom. I'm a great wife and friend and daughter and sister. And I'm a volunteer and I sit on all these boards and I'm a good person. And I give back to my community and I volunteer at my kids' school. So I'm a good person. Okay. I have met a client who wants me to do X and I've decided I'm going to do X. So X must be good. So the idea is I'm a good person. I want to do X. X must be good. This is what happens is you're so confident about who you are as a human that you basically lack any sense of moral judgment or moral awareness about what you're doing because you've just automatically convinced yourself that whatever you do is going to be good because you're a good person. And so that overconfidence bias leads to bad decisions. It leads to this sort of like, almost like the lens through which you do everything is automatically good. So no matter what you do, it's going to be good. And the second concept that goes along with this is moral humility. What happens is if you don't have moral humility, the overconfidence bias is what traps you. Moral humility is the idea that, so we all know what humility is. Humility is we're taught it by our teachers and our parents and our coaches, like, don't be arrogant, recognize that you can always learn from others. You are not better than others. We are all drops from the same ocean. We're all humans. Moral humility is the notion that I, on any given day, in any given moment, could make a bad moral decision given the consequences, the influences, the stresses, the pressures in my life in that moment. So maybe I'm rushing off to go do something for my kids and I have to make a quick decision or I have to read a quick email and maybe I don't read it enough or I don't open the attachment and I just forward it because I'm trying to get to my kids, because I don't imagine that I could ever do anything wrong. So the two combined is absolutely what happened to me. And it led me down this road of making these bad decisions. And and then once I got down the path so far, there was a moment where my gut started screaming. So the other notion that I've done a lot of research on is how do we make decisions? Do we have a mental discipline to make good decisions? Like, what is that? Because most of us are stuck in this, fast-paced race course of life, making decisions really quickly, either out of convenience, out of speed, because somebody's pressuring us to. Maybe our boss is telling us to do something, and even if we feel like it's not right, we do it anyways because our boss is telling us to do it. In my case, a client was asking me to do it, and I just did it anyways. And my gut was screaming. And the problem is our gut, which has a lot of names to it. It's energy, it's your inner voice, it's God, it's the universe, it's your moral compass, whatever you want to call it. We all have it. And I got really good at silencing my inner voice because I didn't want to listen. And when you're going so fast, trying to get to the next thing, it's easy to avoid your inner voice.
So if there's anything our society falls into, and this concept of the moral humility, I think, is what could be lacking for so many scenarios because it's so hard to turn around and say, oh, I take responsibility, I screwed up. And you're all the way down that rabbit hole as a series of bad decisions. Because, like we tell our kids, if you tell one lie, you're going to have to tell another lie to cover that lie up. And suddenly you've told 55 lies and you don't remember the first one. So the question I have is, how do we dig out of that? What was your pathway to saying, all right, I see now what my gut was telling me. I see now that this can't go on. How do you flip the script and regain a position of that you can be confident about, that you're not the bad guy. You did make bad decisions. You do pay restitution. How do you get back?
It starts with self-forgiveness and self-compassion, and then accountability. I think our world lacks accountability.
Agree.
I think from the front line up to the CEO, we have so many examples in the world where people know that they've made mistakes, bad judgment calls, bad decisions, or intentionally doing something, right? And when it comes time and somebody's calling them on it, nobody wants to take accountability because it's going to affect their reputation. They're going to lose money. They're going to lose a client, they might have to go to jail, right? So there's such a avoidance of taking accountability that people get stuck continuing to do the wrong thing. And what I have found is the only way to have true freedom, like just personal freedom, and it is when you are so authentic that you can take accountability for what you've done and stand in your power and know that I made some bad decisions, but I'm still a good person. This does not define me. It refines who I am, and I'm going to grow. Now, the trick is, of course, I have made it my life mission to continue to heal by telling my story and then grow and keep learning how I can help others through my story, because I have learned so much of what I did wrong and how I could have done things differently. And things I wish I would have, I wish I would have asked for help in certain situations. So I don't think that you just take accountability and then that's it. I think you have to take accountability, you have to own it, but then you have to learn from it. You got to grow from it. Because otherwise spiritually, I believe that when we go through hard moments in our lives, or I like to call it struggle, right? Which is what I said, or I think I said this on part one. When we go through those struggles, we're going to keep facing the same type of struggle if we don't learn the lesson we're supposed to learn from it and then grow from it and then do better. So I hope my legacy in this world is that I have gone through this massive life-changing experience and I have learned so much, and every day I vulnerably share it so that other people never make the same bad decisions. And, of course, part of the other whole thing is I've learned how to really apply, I have a 3-step process that I have learned really just to come out of and rise through anything. Because when we go through the struggle, it's very easy to collapse and stay down on our knees and, cry and be bitter and angry and negative and woe is me and play the victim card. And that, I think, we all are allowed to have and feel our emotions. Yes, we got to embrace the pain. And that means if you want to cry, cry. I have cried a lot. But after you've embraced the pain, so I believe there's 3 steps. You first embrace the pain, or embrace the struggle, embrace the change, the disruption. You all in the real estate industry are dealing with a lot of changes right now in the industry. There's regulations and legislative changes and things that you all are dealing with. And that change is scary. But okay, all you can't fight it. It is what it is. So embrace it. Then you let go. And I think when we let go of our fears, for me, I had to let go of my ego. Ego is really holding me back. Because, oh no, what will people say about me? Oh no, this I went to this law school and I can't believe it, right? Like all of the ego things that we tell us, because ego is of course a trap. So if we let go of ego and fear and then control, because I had no control at all of what was happening in my life. And sometimes we just don't have control. If you can let go of it, and then you have to let go of judgment, right? You got to let go of judgment of yourself, which that's where self-compassion comes in. And then you got to let go of judgment of others, because it was so easy for me, even though I was in prison, to keep passing judgment on other women that I was in prison with until I got to county jail. And I had this whole incredible experience of recognizing that I would have absolutely passed judgment on the women I was sitting in county jail with, had it not in my previous life. And then I spent 23 days cooking, eating, praying, sleeping, crying with these women. And, it hit me in a moment. I get chills. It hit me in that moment. They are just like me. But for the grace of God, there go I. And I could have been born in their lives. They could have been born in my lives. And so I tell my kids, we are drops from the same ocean, and treat others with kindness. We are all human beings. We just happen to have different lots in life. Anyway, so that's the 4th thing. And then once you let go, then you can dare, and you can just move forward with courage and dare to do something today. And I think that 3-step process for me has been how I have every single day. I'm iterating this, 3-step process, but that's how I've come out of it every day, with just a little bit of courage. I think as I've gone back and deconstructed, it's helped me understand okay, I wish I had known better. I wish somebody had talked to me about overconfidence bias back then I would have paid more attention. But now I can help others so that they don't fall into the same trap.
There's something we all know in real estate, and that is the fact that buyers are interested in 2 rooms in the house primarily, one being the kitchen and the other one being that master bedroom, because we all know that those who pay the mortgage are really looking for somewhere they can relax. And in fact, Cozy Earth products are designed to transform the 5 to 9, as in the end of the day and bedtime for you lucky people, the time that matters most, into the coziest sanctuary. Cozy Earth products have a special coupon for you. If you go to real estate in the little code block, you are going to save 40% off their sheets and also their super swanky towel. I hear the pajamas are great too. And so just remember this. If you're looking to make that bedroom an even softer, gentler place to end your day, sanctuary awaits you at Cozy Earth. So mention my name when you go to the website, put in real estate to save 40%, and let me know what you think. Okay, so you're a type A person. You have achieved. Then you go to jail, where you're going to have to sit and not do things you're used to doing.
Yeah.
And you have to sit and contemplate, and you must have been stir crazy at the beginning of that. But do you think you'd be where you are today if you hadn't been forced into that place of stillness so that you could think, process, work through things? How transformative was that time of?
Yeah. Very. I don't wish prison on anybody, but people ask me all the time, if you could go back, what would you go back and change? I'm like, I wish I could go back and change and make better decisions and not participate. I take my role in the 2008 and 9 crisis, but I would not take away the prison experience. As hard as it was to leave my kids, because I learned so much about myself being there. Not just, like I said, our humanity, but the way I spent my days, so I'll just talk about where I was the most of the time, which was at the camp. But I would start my day. This is when I was running a lot. So I would start my day. I would get up and first thing I would do before I even got out of my bunk bed was I would write in a gratitude journal. So one of my friends had sent me the 5 minute journal, very popular gratitude journal. And it was incredibly transformative for me because, you know, I would I had a nightlight that I had bought from commissary. So I would turn on the nightlight. I would lean over, I had a ledge next to me on the bunk bed, and I would take my gratitude journal and I would just write in my gratitude journal. And the gratitude, it asks, 3 things that you're grateful for, 3 things that you want to do today, and 3 affirmations, right? So the process of just doing that to me was one of my dares, right? Like just having the courage to find gratitude even though I'm away from my family and my kids and I'm sitting in prison. So that's how I would start my day. Of course, get out of bed, make my bed, whatever. And then the other main thing I would do before I would leave is I would send an email to my children. So I would always start the day by there was a multi-purpose room where there were 5 terminals. So of course we didn't have our phones or there was no internet access, but there's a portal through which you are able to keep 30 names in your profile. Of course, both of my kids had 2 of them. So I would email my kids something in the morning. And then I would, get dressed, whatever. And I would go down and there was this makeshift, I want to say track, but it was really like this random oval kind of. And it was like broken up shells and rocks that served as a surface. And I was able to buy from commissary old, but do you remember the original white Reebok shoes?
Yes, we all wanted those.
Yeah. Well, so, I mean, cute and all, but not great running shoes. And I have flat feet and I'm supposed to wear orthotics, whatever. But so I was able to buy those pretty early on. And so I would lace those up and I was able to buy Russell Athletic men's basketball shorts and shirt and there were no sports bras, whatever bras they gave us, we had to use. So, and ask me why they didn't sell us Russell Athletic, at least women's attire. I have no idea, but we were all wearing men's attire. So I would put my shorts and shirt on and I would go out to this track. We couldn't leave our unit until a specific time, which was 5:45. So I would always get up right after the 5 o'clock count. Guards would come by at 5, check counting us. I would get up, do the whole thing, brush my teeth, get ready, send the email, write in the journal. And then I would go out to the track and I would run for hours, hours over and I would pray. I actually was able to buy remember those little Walkman that not with a tape, but you could get radio stations. It had 5 buttons on it and it attached to my thing. And I bought that off one of the girls who was leaving and with headphones. And so I found the local praise station with praise music and I would listen to praise music and I would run and I would watch the sunrise and I would run. So much so, you'll love this, Leigh. About a month in, after there's various times in the day where there's count. So there's an afternoon count at 4 where you right after people finish work and you have to be standing at your cube. So after that count, I hear over the intercom, inmate Aaron Pace, come to rec, which is recreation. And I'm like, what did I do? Okay. So I go down to recreation and the guard who is in charge of the recreation says, are you that Indian girl that's always running the track? And I'm like, yeah. She says, okay, you're going to teach a class on weight loss. I go, oh, okay. So then, imagine there's 400 women in prison. Most of them don't have the mindset that I have. So they're eating their lives away. They're not, there was, I would say a tenth of the women were committed to exercising and walking and running and all that stuff. But there was another lots of women that didn't understand nutrition, that didn't understand the things that I was blessed to know. So I taught a class and 3 times a week. So it started with I would take their fat measurements and, whatever. And then I had magazines that my friends were sending me Health and Oxygen and Women's Health and Runner's World, whatever. And you know how there's always workouts in the magazines. I would tear those out and keep them. And then so every day I would compile a boot camp, and I would lead every other day, so 3 days a week. And I led them in a boot camp, and I would tell them, go run 3 times. I mean, I already worked out in the morning. This was in the evening. Anyway, so I ended up teaching a class on weight loss. And I felt like it was so great because I got to like teach them, one carb equals this many calories, all the things that I had learned and a lot of women had not learned. But I had a job. So all of us had jobs in prison. You can tell me if I'm giving you too much detail.
Before you move on to your job, I want to hear something about that weight loss class. Was anybody in that class, was this transformative for them, or
Yeah, women lost like
how many of them said to you like they were grateful for the opportunity, just like you have learned to be grateful for the opportunity? Did they see this as a chance to do things differently, I guess? Because that's really what loss is. It's not about the number, it's a chance to live differently.
yeah. So I would say there were about 80 to 90 women that signed up.
That's
Yeah, it was a
great.
lot. It was a lot. And even the process of like one by one weighing them and then measuring with the calipers, measuring their fat percentage. Most of these women, probably 99% of them, had never even done that. So they didn't even understand what that meant
Mhm.
for their body and their health. Of course, it's not about what you look like. It's, how is this affecting your health and your heart and your, diabetic, all these things, right? So first of all, just there for me to teach them the knowledge, I think was really, life-changing for them. And then a lot of women, I remember when we started, a lot of women couldn't even really walk around the track once. And I had measured it and I kind of knew from number of steps, basically 3 times around was a mile. So many of them couldn't even walk around once without being out of breath, which is obviously not healthy. But by the end, those same people could do like 1 to 2 miles. So 3 to 6, which is so incredible. And not necessarily running, but even walking fast. And then, they would come back and I would make them do burpees and we would do ab stuff and planking. And, we just did a bunch of different things. So I don't know if they continued it after I left because I was fortunate enough to leave, earlier than most of these women. But I hope so. I hope they learned something.
I mean, that's really positive because I do think people, if you hear the term weight loss class, you're probably thinking, "Oh, I'm fat, I'm a loser." No, it's like, how do you take care of this? The number one
Yeah.
killer of women is heart disease, and for somebody to not be able to walk around the oblong, I guess what we would call it, one time, but to progress to a mile is so much improvement on taking care of the
Their
most
heart.
important organ we really have. So I'm kind of fascinated by that. And I guess in my head, and when I make the movie about your life, one of the
Okay.
women is going to pick up when you left and continue teaching that
I
class.
love that. I love that.
And
So most of my day, I would say, you talked about stillness, and I definitely, I walked into prison with the notion that this is going to be like an ashram experience for me. And obviously, the hardest part was that I was away from my kids. So when I was able to mentally and emotionally manage what I felt around that, and then I knew that my kids were surrounded by love. They had their dad, they had my parents, and they, because I had been so transparent with the world, everyone in their world and universe knew. So they didn't have to hide from it, right? Teachers would ask them, how's your mom doing? Right. So because of that, I knew and I will say that I recognize the privilege that I was only sentenced to a year. It's a long time to be away from your kids, but compared to many of the women who didn't have the resources that I had to have the attorney I had, let's say. And so I always want to acknowledge that there's definitely privilege in this and how this went down for me. But so because I only had a year and I knew that there was a light at the end of the tunnel, I did not want to have a job where I was doing the job from 7:30 to 4:30, which were working hours, which again, it's like such a silly thing to say, but I was like, if I'm going to be here and I want to spend my time doing things to make myself better, which meant the job that I had most of the time that I was there was I was a teacher in the education department. So I would say a few weeks in, I got the job. Like there was somebody there that ended up getting sent home, and then I got the job, which means right when I first got there, I like hand wrote a resume and I handed it to this woman. So I was asked to teach. And I will say before that, I was the trash girl, which was incredibly humbling. Like I would take the trash out, bag by bag and busted trash and pick it up and put them in the trash compactor. So that was very humbling. And then I got this job in education, and I taught math at 10 in the morning in English and at 2 in the afternoon in Spanish. And so, like I would teach women age ranges 18 to 60 something. They were learning fractions. Like, how do you add 1/3 plus 3/4, right? I had basically just taught my kids at home the same thing. So, like, the pizza pie analogy and like all of that. But it was so amazing to be able to like help people learn. One of the women actually had she was trying to get her GED, and she kept failing. And she happened to live in my housing unit. So like sometimes at night she would come and she would ask me for help, and I started tutoring her in math and all these like math things that she was studying. And then she took it and she passed her GED. So like, yeah, it's like little things. But I would
That's
spend
a
my
big
time.
thing. That's a big
Yeah.
thing.
So I would spend my time, like I would work out in the morning, I would shower, do my job. Then there was lunch. Then I would do my job again. And then in my quote free time, I read a lot. So friends and family sent me lots of books. There's also a library in federal prison, so I also checked books out. But I mean, I have like 50 books in my locker that friends had sent me. Again, such a blessing that I had. And so I had created one of the things I did was I created an Amazon wish list before I went into prison, and then I shared it with like everybody. Because when you're in prison, you can't receive much. You can receive books, magazines, letters, postcards, pictures, right? But that's it, right? So friends wanted to feel like they were doing something to me. So I kept getting lots of books that I had chosen. And I was intentional about the books that I chose because again, I was like, this is my time to read the things that I don't have time to read. So there was like Brene Brown and Oprah Winfrey and like all sorts of self-help, nonfiction, memoirs. But there were also lots of historical fiction and fiction. And I would do this thing where I would like read a fiction, then I'd read a nonfiction, then I'd read a fiction. And I just kept going back and forth. I have a list somewhere of all the books that I read. Um, I wrote lots of letters to friends, like handwritten letters. Sometimes I would sit in the multi-purpose room with like my two closest friends, and we would play board games, share magazines, talk. At night, the TV would be on, and we would, depending on what was playing. I remember back then the shows that were super hot were like Scandal,
Love
Quantico.
Scandal. That needs to come back.
I know it was like Scandal,
Watching
Quantico. On Sunday mornings, I would work out so I could plop myself in front of the TV that showed Joel Osteen, and I would watch Joel Osteen every Sunday morning. Um, that was like one of the things that just gave me hope. And it's interesting because I would say I'm just very spiritual, but I was raised Hindu. But I like probably know more stories from the Bible than a lot of Christians because I have watched that many Joel Osteen sermons. And some people love him, some people hate him, but like at least for me, it was like a source of hope and stories that could give me a sense of love from God's love. And the evenings, we would do all sorts of things. Sometimes we would go back out and walk some more. Sometimes we would chat. Yeah. So there was like, that's how I spent my time, essentially.
Okay, so looking back at where you've broken down how you've landed where you've landed, you've broken down the way that it was in there. You can give one lesson to the world, just one tiny thing that somebody could think about today, write it down in their little journal. What's the one thing you wish people saw differently in the world now that you've been through a pathway most will never go down?
Yeah.
And people have their own preconceived notions about what that pathway looks like, thanks to TV,
Yeah.
thanks to things they've heard because they've never experienced it. But you've lived it.
Mhm.
What's the one thing? Like maybe your kids grow up and they get asked, what did you learn from your mom's pathway?
Yeah.
You only
So
get one, though, and there's probably 85.
there are, but I will say that how do I call to one? I mean, what I believe is that we are all, as humans, the universal truth is we will all face some struggle. There will be something that we um, have to face in our lives that is not what we would have chosen for our lives, whether it's medical, legal, financial, marital, we all will go through something. I think when we're kids, we believe that we can avoid it, which is what I thought I could avoid as a kid, by getting the best grades and going to the best schools. But it's a fallacy, right? Like it's just impossible. And so if and when we can acknowledge that we will go through some struggle, when we go through that struggle, I think our challenge is, and what I hope my legacy is that we all know that we can rise through it no matter what. And it's not easy. It means that you have to be intentional about how you're approaching every single thing you go through every single day. And so that's why, like, that is essentially why I've created the Rise Through It framework. And, embrace, let go, dare to me is applicable at home, at work, no matter what you do, no matter where you are in your life, no matter how old you are, from CEO down to, our kids in college. When we can each recognize that not avoiding the struggle allows us to embrace it and then know that no matter what, I'm going to be okay. Like I will get through life. I will get through this moment. I will come back from it. And look, I'm still struggling. I still have, the government took everything from me. I couldn't make money for 3 years. Financially, there's always things that I'm still dealing with, but I have faith that I will get there and I just keep working at it. So
love that.
I think that's my one thing, if I had to call it.
I think the way that you could look at that in the Christian faith life is don't get in the way of testimony. Because if you think about the stories that move people's lives, it's not the perfect, smooth pathway that moves
like Job,
somebody else
who lost everything.
Yeah, exactly. I've been reading Job again. In fact, that's tomorrow's devotion is actually about Job in chapter 23, but there's the other side. And if you don't go through the valleys, you don't recognize the mountaintop. There's just so many ways to look at it, but I'm
exactly right.
That you have chosen to share your pathway transparently and vulnerably so that other people can maybe think, all right, I've screwed up, not as bad as her. Let's go. Maybe they've said, oh, I almost said yes to that. And maybe they'll have the strength now to say no to the moral pitfalls that happen to everybody's life. And
what's interesting?
The question is not what you run into, it's what you do with it.
Right. And what's really interesting is, I've been doing this work now for almost 9 years. And I get calls now or emails from people that heard me and heard my story. It doesn't matter what audience, real estate, legal, you name it, I've done the industry. And I get calls or emails now 5, 6, 7 years later from people that heard my story. And like somebody will say to me in an email, I just want you to know, I heard you speak, in 2019 for the Michigan State Realtors Association. And something happened today and I remembered your story and it helped me not do something. And I was like, wow, like that is the gift that I can touch people's lives in such a huge way that 6, 7, 8 years from now, people are still remembering the story. Because I think that it's really easy to, the concept of like, do the right thing, all of that, right? It's so easy to say it, but when you hear it told through a real life story, it makes it like it's a cautionary tale that you just can't forget.
But what's funny though is you're not actually a do the right thing person. You're a don't do the wrong thing person.
Yeah.
So they're saying to you, you kept me from doing something wrong instead of the bulk of the motivational presentations out there, which say, you can do it, go fly. And you're like, actually, don't always fly. And actually, don't always.
It's true. Actually, I love this analysis that you just gave me. Yeah, it's amazing.
That's probably how you need to redo one of your little, what do we call it? Not the PCT thing, the superhero. What's the phrase?
Battle cry.
The battle cry. There's your battle cry.
Don't do the wrong thing.
Don't do the wrong thing. I
think it could be like a subtitle, Rise Through It, don't do the wrong thing.
Like legit, it is the opposite of every motivational presentation. And
you're right. Actually, that's so interesting. I need to mull on that a bit. I need to
okay, we'll make sure that you have the recording so you can think about it. But now I'm thinking about how we coach our kids. And of course you want them to go do things, but it's always don't do this one thing because I was there. I've been there. Mom has made those mistakes. Don't do what mom did.
Have you seen what I like? I'm doing this series right now. Today's day 5. And it's called A Lawyer's Insights from Prison. I don't know if you've seen it. It's on LinkedIn and Instagram and YouTube. And so today happens to be today's post, which went out 2 hours ago, is called Honoring Our Children with the Truth. And I basically share, and I'm just being super raw and vulnerable, and I'm sharing stories that I never get to share from stage because I never have time. So today's story is basically about how I told my kids that I was having to go to prison and why I honored them with the truth and why I think it's so important as parents for us to recognize that our kids will learn the lessons that they're supposed to learn from our good and bad decisions, so that when they grow up and then they have to deal with their good and bad decisions, right? They're prepared instead of protecting and, keeping them in a bubble. I just don't think that there's no right and wrong way to parent. So for
Yes,
me,
there is. Helicoptering is wrong.
well,
If your
yeah.
kid's never
But I'm
going to
gonna admit,
it's not cool.
I mean, I will admit that I have the helicoptering mother in me,
Oh, I
and
do too, but I have to fight her off because my
100%.
they need to skin their knees. They need to screw up, and
Yes.
I would love to control my daughter's decisions, but she has to make them so that I'm not in the way of her testimony either. So I can't be in the way of her pathway, but I can still say, "Please consider."
Yeah. Well, so I have 2 in college, right? And so, um, and they're so different from each other, like 100% different from each other.
Same
They're best
DNA, same household. How did this happen? Yeah.
I know they're best friends, but he is just like me. He's a total mini me, and she is just like her dad. And so, and I'm very close to both of them, and they're very close to their dad as well, thank God. But what like my daughter is the kid that like probably would rather never have to take another exam in her life if she didn't have to, right? But she's an athlete in college. And so, you kind of have to do okay to stay playing volleyball. So, but I used to like rescue her last year in college and high school. And I would like, and she does have some mental health challenges. And so it's been challenge like first semester of college was really hard for her. She was very homesick, but I'm not rescuing her. And, she didn't do so well in one of her classes. And I'm like, that's okay. We'll take a summer course to make it up. Like I am choosing that if I keep, you know, creating pathways to like solutions for her, she'll
She
never
never gets
yeah.
she
She'll never
doesn't get to have the experience her mom did.
Right. Right. No, I mean, like I think our kids have to fail. They have to learn and then figure out how to come back from that because otherwise they're going to be adults not knowing how to cope. So,
And it's going to happen as we discussed a little bit ago. So knowing how to keep going is a life skill and a learned skill. And that's why if you are listening or watching this and you find yourself super helicoptering, just go get your little cup of hot tea and learn to sit back in your chair and hold the tea real tight. Say, I'm going to say it and not going to say it. Because if I learn to not say things, I can get out of the way. So I'm going to don't do the wrong thing myself.
yeah,
But
there's a book. I was on a flight recently. Oh, I have to remember the book. There was a book that I was sitting next to a mother and she was telling me about it. It's called I'm going to look it up and remember it. And I'm going to send it to you. It was essentially about how to like not be involved in our kids' lives more than that we need to be as parents, as moms. Basically just like stop helicoptering. God, I wish I could remember the name, but it was so good. It's like,
I think maybe it's maybe we need to talk about maybe this is guardrail parenting. That's a whole different episode. Maybe we have to get on
guardrail parenting. Yeah.
Yeah, we should have guardrails, but we don't need a bubble. But we should
Yeah.
have guardrails.
Okay.
Our
I
family
could
is
be on board
cool
with
with
that.
this, and our family is cool with this, and you can operate in here, but if you get outside the guardrails, that's not how we roll.
Yeah.
Hmm. Hmm. There's a whole new topic and book in here, and I'm just going to have to write
Okay.
it.
Well, so I hope your audience has been inspired, touched, moved by the story, by the message. And, if I could ever answer any questions or participate or help any of your listeners, I'd love to.
Which is great because all of Rashmi's contact information is in the show notes for this episode. And frankly, if y'all think we should co-author something about this brand new concept of guardrail
parenting,
you should comment below.
Exactly.
You want to see us do something collaborative because I'm going to have to go do some note taking about this. And I guess I'll be grateful that I'm not.
Send me your notes. Send me your notes. We'll be on Google Doc and we'll be going.
Google Doc and totally share that. So if you think we should do that, you should comment. But I think you should also drop a comment below about something that struck you from Rashmi's story or from the unpacking that could be impactful in somebody, even if it's not you. Part of what we always have to remember is that when we speak our stories and when we tell what we've learned, it might not be for the person with whom you're speaking. It might be for that person over in the corner who's eavesdropping, who needed it desperately. So thank y'all for visiting with us in 2 long episodes. And Rashmi, thank you so much for
It's so fun.
bringing a pretty intense real estate story to a place that is impactful for all kinds of people. And I'm just so grateful and thank you for that.
Thank you, Leigh, for having me. It's been so much fun.
Right, people, you got to hit the bell to subscribe. And if you watch this episode, you're thinking, I kind of need part 1, that link is over here too. I don't even know where to point. So go to the other link and leave us a comment, a 5-star review. And most importantly, come back and see us next time. By the way, friends, don't miss my brand new coaching program at answers.realestate, where you can have access to Leigh Brown, submit your questions, have them answered, meet like-minded professionals, have an entire library to help you build your business no matter what happens in the market. Get signed up today. I promise you'll be glad you did. So if you found value in this episode, please like and subscribe to this channel, turn on the bell, and catch another amazing episode by clicking above. Crazy Shit in Real Estate is also available in all of your normal podcast apps. So if that's where you like to hang out, go find me, click subscribe, and most importantly, leave me a review that says you think I'm awesome, my guests are awesome, or this content is just exactly what you were looking for. And then, by the way, if there's something you need, you want to learn about something, you can comment below anytime. You can also send me a direct message if you need to remain anonymous. No judgment. But anyway, I'll only judge if you forget to subscribe and click. I'll see you next time.